Welcome back to the Devil's Ledger for the week of June 1st, 2026. And happy blue moon, everyone. As I'm recording this, the full moon, the second one this month, which is why it's a blue moon, it's bright and beautiful and hanging over Los Angeles, and it's one of those nights that maybe feels a little too still, a little too perfect. You know, like something's watching me right back. But look, before we get into any of that, I just want to give a heartfelt congratulations to all of our graduates. Wherever you are, whatever you've just finished, it's one of those rare moments right now in your life where everything still feels possible. So may you go on to do wonderful things, big and small. And now, the creepiest thing I heard this week. So the story of Grace, you'll understand this in a moment, the story of Grace begins appropriately enough with something ordinary. Grace is a Victorian-era doll, the sort of toy that once sat quietly on nursery shelves throughout Britain, porcelain-faced, dressed in period clothing, and possessing the fixed, unsettling stare that seems common to antique dolls. Grace would likely have spent more than a century in obscurity had she not become associated with a series Grace would likely have spent more than a century in obscurity had she not been associated with a series of strange events that have transformed her from collectible. Grace would likely have spent more than a century in obscurity had she not become associated with a series of strange events that transformed her from collectible curiosity into what some paranormal investigators now call the most haunted object in the United Kingdom. According to investigators from a Cheshire-based ghost hunting group known as the Haunted Hunts, Grace's reputation began in earnest during a 2018 investigation at a historic Welsh property called something that I can't pronounce. Grace's reputation began in earnest during a 2018 investigation at a historic Welsh property called something that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. It's got like 34 letters in it. Anyway, the doll had been brought along merely as a trigger object, a tool intended to encourage communication with other alleged spirits. But what followed, they claim, was entirely unexpected. Guests reported nausea and headaches, burning sensations in their eyes, feelings of overwhelming dread. And during the investigation, Grace reportedly fell from a chair on her own, and investigators later captured electronic voice phenomena, mysterious sounds interpreted as words or phrases near the doll. And from that point forward, Grace's legend only grew. The doll was moved to Tatton Old Hall in Cheshire, where investigators claim unusual activity followed her there. Visitors reported hearing knocks and footsteps, guttural voices. Electronic equipment allegedly reacted in her presence, and investigators began collecting recordings that they interpreted as messages. Over time, some paranormal researchers concluded that multiple entities, not just one spirit, they'd become attached to the doll. As the story spread online, Grace earned comparisons to America's famous Annabelle doll and became a fixture of British paranormal television, live streams, and ghost hunting events. Skeptics, of course, point out that none of these claims have been independently verified. True, electronic voice phenomena are notoriously subjective. Listeners often hear words only after being told what they're supposed to hear. And antique dolls also occupy a unique place in horror culture, making them ideal vessels for modern folklore. But belief has a momentum of its own, and the more Grace's reputation grew, the more people arrived expecting an experience. And many got one. Which brings us to this latest chapter. In very recent days, as recently as yesterday, paranormal investigators examining Grace reported capturing what they believe is a chilling one-word message from the doll itself. Burn. The alleged communication immediately reignited interest in the artifact, spreading across paranormal social media communities and ghost hunting channels. The claim joins a growing catalog of reported messages associated with Grace, including previous phrases that investigators interpreted as references to eyes, entrapment, evil, and release. Supporters view the latest recording as evidence that whatever's attached to the doll remains very active. Skeptics see another example of ambiguous audio being shaped by expectation and suggestion. Either way, Grace has accomplished something remarkable. For more than a century, she was simply a child's toy. Today, locked behind glass and surrounded by cameras, she's become a modern legend. One of those rare objects that exists simultaneously as artifact, ghost story, internet phenomenon, and cautionary tale. Whether haunted or merely infamous, Grace continues to stare silently outward while people argue about what they've heard or... Grace continues to stare silently outward while people argue about what they've heard her say. And maybe that uncertainty is the real source of her power. This week on The Devil Within, we continue with Season 5, What We Built and What We Buried, with an episode entitled The Man Who Fixed Everything. The subtitle should be, or at least he thought he did. Because this week we take a deep dive into the chemist who introduced chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, as a safer alternative to the gases once used in modern refrigeration. At the time, it was hailed as a breakthrough. It was cleaner, safer, more stable. Beers were cold. A solution. But as we've seen again and again in this series, solutions have a way of revealing consequences long after the celebration ends. Because what came next wasn't just unintended. It was a global catastrophe. And once it was understood, it was already everywhere. That's this week on The Devil Within. On Criminal Mischief, Carolyn is back after a week's hiatus with another chilling, meticulously researched look at the darker corners of human behavior. If you've listened before, you already know. She doesn't just tell these stories. She builds them. And this one's no exception. On the culture of criminal cool, we're up to episode 5, and the response has been incredible. Seriously, thank you to everyone for sending in messages and comments, because we're seeing the same thing you are. Adam Diaz has a story that's worth listening to. We hope you stick around for the rest. Over on The Slippery, Nancy and Scott are back with another one of those stories that just makes you stop halfway through and go, what? There's no way this is real. Deception, betrayal, grift. The things that make true crime, well, true crime. The show is quietly becoming a must-listen. Let's make it not so quiet. And finally, this week in horror. It's been a strange couple of weeks, and it feels like one of those times where the ground is shifting beneath our feet here in Hollywood. 2 feature films, Obsession and Backrooms, have quite literally taken over the box office. And here's the part that should make everyone in here... And here's the part that's already making most other people in Hollywood a little nervous. They're coming from creators who started on YouTube. They're not traditional studios, not coming out of the film school system, no legacy attached to them. They're new voices with new instincts. And audiences are showing up. And they're showing up big. Record-breaking numbers, massive attention, overnight elevation into the kind of conversations usually reserved for established directors. And one of these kids is just barely 20 years old. So this isn't just a moment. It could actually be a signal that the next wave of horror and maybe the next wave of filmmaking isn't coming from inside the system. It's obviously coming from far outside of the establishment. So I'm curious, what do you think? Check out Obsession and Backrooms and let me know in the comments. Because if this is the future, it's going to look very different from a past that we all know very well. So that's it for today from The Devil's Ledger. We wish you a clear sky, a bright moon, and a summer that feels just a little longer than it should. And we'll see you this week across the EVO universe. The Devil's Ledger is an EVO production recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil's Ledger, I'm your writer and host, Brandon Morgan.